The Fox City Score chapter and WHBY are pleased to bring you Biz Talk, a chance for you to hear from entrepreneurs and professionals as they share their experiences from starting to sustaining growth. Learn the skills needed for your business to be successful. If you missed anything, you can catch the Biz Talk podcast at biztalkwithscore.com. And now from the Myron Construction Studio, it's Biz Talk on WHBY.
Good morning and welcome to Biz Talk with Score. We'll talk about the Score chapter later in the show. But first I want to get to my co-host this week. Joining me is Rick Sense. How are you this week, Rick?
I'm doing well, Terry.
Excellent. Our guest this week is small person craftsman with a pottery in Green Bay. Her name is Karen Eckbert. Karen, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself before you got into the pottery business.
Sure. My name is Karen Eckberg. I am a transplant from southern Wisconsin. I moved to Green Bay in 2001, my husband's hometown. My husband, Joe, is a senior VP at Camera Corner, and we have two daughters, one at junior at Purdue and one starting as a freshman. So I'm a mom. I have a master's degree in library science. I'm a librarian by trade, and a teacher. Everything I've ever done, I've taught things.
Okay. So we're certainly going to talk about some learning and teaching during the show. Mm-hmm. So what led to you making a career switch and becoming a potter?
It was not by choice per se. It was definitely a natural transition. I have a humanities background, music and English primarily. And so I became an academic librarian working in colleges around Wisconsin. And I love being a teacher. I love teaching kids and adults what they needed to know about finding things in the library. And I became I call it a reluctant stay-at-home mom after being laid off in 2014. And it was a good decision at the time. It wasn't something that I wanted to be. I was a reluctant stay-at-home mom. I started taking non-credit pottery classes at the NWTC Artisan and Business Center in 2018. And that began my obsession with clay. So it wasn't something that I necessarily thought about the first day 6 years ago, sitting at a wheel, learning how to center a little ball of clay. But after a few years, it became apparent that I could do this, and it was something that I wanted to try to do.
Okay. And did you just pick the pottery course because you're looking for something and thought that would be neat to try? Or was there something what you drove you to try that?
I had taken things like painting classes and drawing classes, and those were awesome. And I had taken a class down in Madison 25 years ago, and I loved it. And then I had always said if I had time, I wanted to get back into playing with clay again. I was gifted a one-shot non-credit course. They're called, most of the classes at NWTC Artisan Business Center are non-credit, but they do also have credit courses. I was gifted a certificate to take a pottery class, a beginner pottery class. And 6 years ago this week, I sat down and I said, I love this. Give me more. And it started from there, really.
Okay. And the Artisan and Business Center, it's at Northeast Technical College. Is that the organization that really did all your training to really help you get to the point of where you are today?
Oh, definitely. I took as many of the non-credit classes that I could possibly find, beginner, intermediate. I took some of their specialized classes, so firing techniques called raku, pit firing, soda firing, that sort of thing. They have all those things there. And I ended up taking the credit courses, they started offering during COVID actually, 12 credit courses, at TC in pottery. So I ended up with a certificate in 2021, a certificate in ceramics from TC. And that was really focused. So learning this skill was great, and learning as a hobby, and finding all my family and friends finding presents of pottery that I had made. Those first couple of years became better and better, right? But learning how to create plates, and plates that looked the same as the first plate over and over again, as many as I could that were the same height with the same kind of a lip. That's a skill set. So, and yes, I learned everything that I know from TC.
Okay. So when and what made you say, oh, I could do this for a living?
I have not yet paid myself. Everything that I have made goes back into the business. And if I can make enough to buy a bag of clay, I called it even. I called it a day. I started really super small. My very first vendor fair, and we can get into all the things that I do right now, but I started off with one little table with a ratty old tablecloth on it, at a very easy for a beginner, a vendor, not knowing what I was going to do. And then showing your art, showing something that you have made is really difficult for a lot of people. And I tried it one night in October of, I think it was in 2018, shortly after I started doing the non-credit courses, and I sold one bowl to a fellow potter. And he took it and he said, "This is gorgeous. Don't stop." And I only sold one piece. So I said, okay, I'll try to continue again. And then I sold a little bit more than the next time. And so it really kind of was these small steps. I have made enough now. I do pay rent. I have insurance. I have, all those little things that a small business owner needs. I have Square. I use, the QuickBooks for self-employed. So all those little things. Now I've tried very hard to separate my personal checking account, from the business account. And that's really what's keeping me going. It's like, okay, I can make rent this month. Woohoo! And that's a really big deal. So it started small. There are some days that I forget about all the things that I end up doing. So this is actually kind of cool that I'm doing this. Like, oh yeah, I'm doing all these things.
So when you decided to start up a business, how did you learn what you needed to do to run a business?
I learned that my background in humanities did not give me the tools that I needed. I didn't know the questions I needed answered. I didn't know that I had so many things and pieces, establishing myself as an LLC, for example, and making sure that I paid sales tax. Okay. So how does that work? I do some wholesale pieces. So I didn't know how sales tax worked in that sense when I'm selling pieces to another business, and they then sold that part. So I didn't quite know what those questions were. I ended up reaching out to SCORE. I ended up reaching out and asking the real big questions. And I was lucky enough to have someone, who is absolutely fabulous. And I've been able to periodically over the years say, okay, how do I do this? What do I need to know when I start? I had a vendor fair in Michigan, for example. how do I submit that? How do I separate that? It's 5% sales tax versus 5.5. Okay. And those little things that I had no idea about. I didn't know anything about creating a logo. I didn't know anything. So it's a little bit step by step. I didn't know anything about finding insurance or finding an accountant who can look at my books periodically. And I'm talking one time in the last 3 years, but enough so that I can figure out how I can keep it separate and keep up to date and keep on top of things. There's a lot that I did not know that I needed to know.
So how did you find out that you needed to know them?
Well, things like I knew that I wanted to keep myself and my husband safe. I mean, I sell coffee cups and I sell other things, but I wanted to be able to expand in other venues, like having workshops and things. So I knew that I wanted to be an LLC. And as soon as I did that, I didn't realize I had to renew or tell them, yes, indeed, I'm still an active LLC. And I would get emails. I'm like, okay, and I would ask my mentor, I'll name him. Can I name my mentor?
Yeah.
Ryan Kauth. He's awesome. He's like, yes, you need to do this. And this is who you would talk to. But there's also little things like I didn't know that I wanted, or that it would be such a big deal for me to have the insurance that I needed and what kind of insurance. Remember, I'm humanities and I didn't understand umbrellas, and I don't still, but finding people who could help me figure out, okay, yes, we needed to have this. You need to have this, and you need to have an umbrella of this, and you have to have this. Okay, I'll do it. And finding people that you trust.
Okay. So how'd you learn how to use QuickBooks? Had you used it before, or did you get training for that too?
Oh, I've learned so many pieces of software over the last 4 years. I had to learn everything from scratch. It is a wonderful thing having young kids who can help, I tell you. And there's a lot. QuickBooks was really helpful in their how to do section. So that wasn't as hard as some other pieces of software that I have had to learn.
Okay. So in 2021, you start up your business.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know a lot about what you have to do. You have to do something, and you start getting help. So there's a lot there, but how do you have the time, how do you create the time to make sure you can focus on learning your craft more and developing your skills?
Good question. I had quickly outgrown the NWTC Artisan Business Center. They're set up for the beginner, for those people who are mostly hobbyists, right? Not the production ceramics. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great place to begin. So I started playing a lot with various tools. So I played a little bit with metals. A lot of my inspiration comes from seeing what other people are doing. And that was one of the neat things about having a community studio, as in the Artisan Business Center. But having the game changer of COVID and setting up my wheel in my garage in 2020 to 2022, I ended up having my studio in my garage. And my little, finding the things that I wanted to do, sculptures and collaborative pieces, became more and more important. And to, things like finding new artists out there and what are they doing. That's really important. I'm working on a collaborative right now with 2 other artists, for example. And that is driving me. You know, I'm doing a lot of things that I have to do, that I want to do to keep my business afloat. But I also am doing a lot of things that make me happy and that I'm striving for as a professional artist.
Okay.
I think I can say that now.
Okay. Thank you. You're on Biz Talk with Score and WHBY. We've reached the point for our first break. We'll be right back after this.
Good morning again, and welcome back to Biz Talk with Score on WHBY Radio. It's good to have you listening with us this morning. Our guest is Karen Eckberg, and we'll get back to Karen in just a little bit. But first, I'd like to take a few moments to talk to you about Score. Fox City Score serves an 8-county area with offices in Appleton, Oshkosh, and in Fond du Lac. We have about 45 volunteer mentors, each an expert in their field, and offering entrepreneurs no cost and confidential mentoring. Those areas of expertise include IT, social media, marketing, cash flow, accounting, strategic planning, workflow, human resources, retail best practices, and many, many others. In order to register for a no-cost, confidential mentoring session, and or to learn more about the Fox City Score chapter, please visit our website at score.org/Fox Cities. You can learn more about how the Score chapter can assist you with starting and or growing your business, and you can complete an application for a mentoring session. Simply complete the online form and submit it to Score. In a few days, a Score mentor will be contacting you to set up a meeting. Remember, Score is no cost and offers experts who can offer you assistance in many different areas. To get started, visit our website at score.org/Fox Cities. And to support small business people, Fox City Score is always looking for new mentors. If you have experience that you would like to share with others, we would love to talk to you. We welcome volunteers with experience in all aspects of business. Small business owners need your help, and your experience can make a real difference to their success. Go to score.org/Fox Cities, click on the volunteer button, and fill out the short application, and we'll get back to you to explain more. So, Karen, I have to ask, where are you located now, and how did you get to that location?
So 2 years after I started taking the non-credit courses, I started taking the certificate started in the certificate program at NWTC just about the time that COVID started. Up to that point, NWTC wasn't allowing people to bring clay home because everything was in-house. And it was a game changer in a lot of ways, in that they allowed us to bring clay home because of all the various structures at this open studio time. So I started bringing home my clay in 2020, and I kicked out our cars out of our little garage and took up shop in 1.5 stalls. And that happened for 2 summers. And in the colder months, I ended up going back to TC at their open studio, and that was fine. But I needed to have a space starting the fall of 2022, so 2 years ago. My business grew to a point where I had someone else working with me. They're no longer working with me right now, but someone else was working with me, and we had a huge commission of finding over 100 ornaments for Heritage Hill. And it was our first large scale commission. And because it was for the holidays, I needed to continue working until December. I did not have that space available in my little garage. It's not insulated. And it wasn't, I had purchased a kiln by that time and had purchased a wheel, but I didn't have the space. So summer of 2022, I was trying to find a permanent or a semi-permanent studio situation of 500 square feet, 400 square feet, something enough akin to the space that I was using in the garage, which was basically a stall. I searched high and low. I talked to the city about possible solutions. I looked at the pop-ups. There's a pop-up program through the city of Green Bay. There's a lot of great spaces available for office, people who needed an office space. And I didn't need an office space. I didn't want carpet. I needed access to water. I needed lots. It's a messy art. The messy arts, but I didn't need something that was 10,000 square feet. Something that was small, a garage. And it just so happened that and I call it the fates, or who you know, it's who you know, and knowing who you know and knowing who to ask. And I ended up finding a warehouse. Again, this is 2022, that wasn't being used at a local business downtown Green Bay. And the stipulation was it was not going to be a public studio. It wasn't going to be something that I could have public people in it. I'm like, that's fine. That's fine. When you ask me what I want to do in a few years, that's something different. But I needed just some place to start. So I moved into this space at a very, very reasonable price point, downtown Green Bay. I have insurance on the space, and I have a lease and everything, and I've been there now for 2 years. So it's worked out really super well. But yeah, I keep looking just to look at what the market is, and it hasn't gotten any better for the messy arts.
Okay, we're at the spot for our second break. You're listening to Biz Talk with Score on WHBY, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Biz Talk with Score. We're talking with Karen Eckbert from Owl Arts LLC, and we'll get back to Karen in a second. But before we do that, I want to give you an update on education opportunities. And been mentioning this a few times recently, but want to bring it up again, that our second annual Accelerate Your Business for Women conference is coming up. It is September 30th at the Kalahari Conference Center in Wisconsin Dells, and all 5 Wisconsin SCORE chapters are sponsoring it this year. There's a small cost. It's $75, but it's a day-long event, and it's a really good opportunity to network, to learn about different things around finance and planning and marketing your business, and there's some good seminars too. We had some great feedback from last year's event that was in Green Lake, and expect we'll get the same thing this year as well. So again, it's Accelerate Your Business for Women 24, September 30th at the Kalahari Conference Center, and you go to score.org/Fox Cities, and you will find in the front page a landing spot for it where you can click and join and register. I'll also mention that if you go to score.org/Fox Cities, you'll see a tab up near the top called Workshops and Events. And I just want to mention that because if you go in there, there are literally hundreds and probably even thousands of different webinars and events on almost everything you can imagine. And there's some live ones every month. But there are many ones that were pre-recorded, so you can go in and find a lot of different options and a lot of different topics. There are both national ones that are kind of featured across the country, but many local ones. But you can go into almost any chapter and find ones you want. So there's some great opportunities on seminars and workshops there. Most of them are free. But again, go to score.org/Fox Cities. And click on the Workshops and Events tab for that. Okay. So now we'll turn back to Karen. And Karen, let's start this segment by first talking about the pottery making process. How do you make pottery?
Oh, let me talk about pottery. You start with clay from the earth. I get clay by the bags. That's been all the debris and other things that you also find in the earth has been taken out of. You form it. So you could use a wheel to make something that's cylindrical, but you don't necessarily need a wheel. I do a lot of my workshops by hand building, with your hands. Then you let dry. So in order to make a mug, you make a cylinder, you let it dry for a little bit, then you put a handle on and you trim the bottom so it looks nice. Then you let dry. You don't want any moisture in a kiln. Kiln is a big oven made for a very, very high fire. So there are different ranges of clay bodies. I use something called stoneware, which is something that is very common. It's what's called a mid-fire clay body. Something like terracotta that you would find on your front steps, that is called a low fire. And porcelain is even higher. That's called a high fire. So I use something in the middle, nice and easy. And a kiln can range, it depends on what kind of kiln, how big it is, and that sort of thing. I purchased my current, I have 2 kilns right now, transitioning right now. The second one I purchased used. It's probably about 40 years old, somewhere around $2,500. And it's ginormous. She's a beast. And the reason why she's so important to a potter is because you need to get it from a chemical process with heat to almost 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit to get it from the chemical process of clay to ceramic. So when you're talking about clay, it's all wet and the goopy stuff at the bottom of the lake, to ceramic, which is something that is durable. And that's one of the reasons why we know when people started using clay into ceramic and accidentally putting it next to a fire, and thousands of years later, we find them. 18,000 BC, for example, the first earliest known pottery vessels were found in China. But there's also figurines and other things that you can make out of clay and then putting it next to a hot fire. So after you let something dry, then you put it into a firing, the first firing called a bisque fire. And that is a range around 1900, 1950 Fahrenheit. It's a cone, and a cone is a range. And then you glaze something after it comes out and it's hard and you can't reshape it in a lot of ways. Then you put a glaze on something, and that's a combination of silica, alumina, and then a flux, which makes something really shiny or not so shiny. And the combination of that, and then you put it back in the kiln at even a hotter degree. And a second firing, the glaze firing, is around 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, this is what I fire things to. It's not, everyone is different. And then you can even do a third firing with something special, something like a bright silver or gold on something, and that's a luster. And that's at a really low firing. So it can go up to 3, sometimes 4 firings for something to be done. Clay is a very, the process of pottery and making something is a patient process. It's not something that is going to be done tomorrow. I could possibly make you a mug, and I could possibly get in your hands maybe in 10 days, 14 days if I can do that, if I need to get something done. But it can be very slow, and it can be very wearing on someone who's not as patient as they would like. So, yeah.
Okay. So as you're making the pottery, what did you start selling first? Was it commission pieces, or did you just make them and sell them like that?
I ended up doing things as a vendor fair, just things that I had already made. So bowls, mugs. I started creating mugs and learning that process, and plates, figuring out how to put a handle on a mug is not an easy feat, because you can get kind of a funky little mug handle. And then I started doing things I knew that people would buy, or I started keeping track of it. Do they buy a big bowl? Do they buy, this event I know I can sell a lot of ornaments at, or I can sell things for the garden. Like I make garden stakes, for example, and you can write whatever you want to write on the garden stake. It just depends, and it also depends on the season. So I do things into the fall. I do things in wintertime. I did a few things over near the holidays, and so I would have a lot more ornaments at that point at vendor fairs versus something in the fall, and I would have little ceramic pumpkins and things that are traditionally bowls and stuff like that. So it depends on the time of year, on what I tend to make. And this time of year, I'm making a lot of things that are with leaves, because leaves are ginormous. So I found some people to gift me some rhubarb leaves and some hosta leaves and some really ginormous leaves, and I'm making bowls out of those. So it just kind of depends on the season. And I'm starting to, and I have been keeping track of what I'm doing. And now that I'm in my third year of the business, I'm kind of keeping an eye on, okay, I'm selling a lot of those things here. But every single day, even over, I've been doing a couple of events a number of years in a row. It just depends on who comes to those events, really.
Okay.
What's your favorite thing to make?
My favorite thing to make. I love making big bowls because they are so satisfying to make when they're ginormous and they're just perfect. I like making those, but I also like making plates because there's a Zen moment where it's just you and the clay, and you know what you're supposed to do in order to make that clay centered, and you know how to form the plate on a wheel. There's a lot of things that I like making. But those are my two favorite things.
So, let's talk a little bit about the fairs and events. What was your first fair or craft fair?
My very first craft fair was at one table right after I had started. I didn't do so well, but I didn't give up. And then I ended up doing things like, things that I probably should not have been there, and not to say anything unkindly to someone who thinks of themselves as a crafter. I'm also a crafter. I consider myself more of an artisan, and there's some vendor fairs, for example, that lend itself to those people who are crafters. And there's nothing wrong with that. But my vision of what I wanted to do was more the artisan, something that was a little bit more higher scale, but not to the point of only at galleries or only selling things that are out of my reach. I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to be able to sell magnets and sell other things. So I ended up starting in 2022, really focusing on, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. If I don't do well here, I'm not going to do it. And I've learned a lot, and I've been to some fairs that I probably no one sold for me because they could get something that was commercially made down the row. I pride myself on having a reasonable price, learning, you talk about what did I not know? Things like what my price was. What was the value that I placed on making a mug? And how do I help a consumer who wants me to make a mug for them understand that it's not going to be only $20 that you could get at Target. It's, if you want an entire, 8-piece, 42-piece dinnerware set, and for 8 people with 4 pieces, everything, 4 pieces for each person, it's not going to just be $20 a person to make a mug. That was a lesson in not knowing what I needed to know, and trying to figure out like a formula that I could say, this is what it's going to cost you. This is how much I'm worth. This is also how much the supplies are, to purchase enough clay to do that. So, I've done, I would say my favorite one is Art Fest, downtown Green Bay, because it's bringing the arts back downtown. And that's a multi-day. That was last year was my first multi-day, vendor fair. But I've had vendor fairs up in Marinette, Michigan, Menominee, Michigan. And then I've been down to Port Washington. So, trying to spread myself around in the, northeastern Wisconsin isn't just where I'm at, but kind of spreading myself a little bit.
So do these craft fairs lead to opportunities, say, at wholesale sales?
Absolutely. Yes, they do. In fact, I have had, one client come to me and said, I watch you on Instagram. I saw you're going to be here. Can you make me things for my store to sell? That was one thing. My favorite one was in 2021, my very first, very large dinnerware set. It was for I've done a couple 32-piece dinnerware sets. And this was my very first one in 2021. So I was just fresh out of the certificate program, and I had no idea how to set up a quote. But I did have someone come by and said, I like your style. Do you do commissions? And I've had a number of commissions just by talking with people at vendor fairs. Hey, I want 4 plates that are really brightly colored. Let's talk about it. I like your style, 24-piece dinnerware set. So I've done a number of dinnerware sets, as well as ornaments and mugs and other things for other people to sell.
Okay. And I know you've sold in a few retail stores too. How did you get into those stores or locations?
By asking. I currently have a number of pieces at Loco Wisco, which is downtown Green Bay. And the owner had set up an open request. Hey, are you an artisan? Do you have things that I could sell at my place? And so I started when she opened up her store, I think about 2 years now. And I periodically will bring her more pieces to sell. And right now I have Wisconsin mugs, stamped with a heart on it. And that's really satisfying because it's those partnerships that, hey, I know someone now. She knows someone who does all these, commissions and specialized things that there's not a lot of potters who will do commissions. And I love doing commissions. I think they're so special because it's a way that you can bring a piece of art into your house and use every day.
Okay. So you've done a lot since you started out 3 years ago. What comes next?
What comes next? I have some visions as to what I'd like, to move towards. I would like to have an open studio so that public can walk in and purchase pieces, either from my own collection and things that I've made, or other artisan pieces that other people have had. So a small little store, perhaps. I am also want to have a space to do workshops, which is a huge part of my business. And right now I take everything that I need to my client's space. And it's usually a business. The Art Garage, for example, has hosted me, many occasions. Heritage Hill, I have 3 workshops between now and March scheduled for at Heritage Hill. But I also do private. I've done a birthday party. And I bring all the things that I know that we might use. So all the clay, all the tools, all of the glazes, everything. So I have it all figured out how to have it all done at one time, so I can have one workshop at one time. My future, I would really like to have a space that I can sell to people like myself, things for the pottery business. Right now there's very few, supply places in Wisconsin, to purchase clay and glazes and other tools. The closest and the one that I go to is Waukesha. Okay. And that is a 4-hour drive there and back. And I go maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and it's a truck. So I would love to be able to offer supplies for potters.
Okay. On that, we're going to take our last break. You're listening to Biz Talk with Score and WHBI, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Biz Talk with Score. I would like to thank the sponsors and donors who bring Biz Talk with Score to you each weekend. We couldn't present Biz Talk without their generous support. Thank you to Haling & Associates. Haling & Associates helps small businesses and individuals not just prepare tax returns, but plan for taxes, thereby helping you minimize taxes for this year and beyond. Haling & Associates, personal connection, positive results. A special thank you to the Business News for promoting our program in the biweekly business newspaper serving Northeast Wisconsin. If you aren't already subscribing to the Business News, you should. The paper is delivered biweekly and contains relevant and useful information about the business community in Northeast Wisconsin. We would also like to recognize the David L. and Rita E. Nelson Fund within the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region for their generous donation in support of Biz Talk and Score Fox Cities. So with that, we'll turn back to Karen for the last part of the show. And Karen, could you let people know how they can contact Owl Arts LLC?
Sure. My business website is owlarts920.org. I try to keep that updated, including a list of workshops that I have coming up, etc. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at owlarts920. Look at either of those, and email owlarts920@gmail.
Okay. So as we go back over the discussion during the show, there's an incredible amount of evolution that's had to take place over about a 3 to 5 year period, both in making your pottery and selling your pottery. And then also even when we talked about where the future goes, we're back to evolving even more. How do you manage that type of change? Is it something you think about, or is it just something you know how to adapt to?
I don't think anyone knows how to adapt to change. I think for me, the biggest struggle was being patient with myself, with my business, knowing when I needed to ask for help from either from my friends and network or from other people who have done it. And I know some other people who are in the same boat, but in various situations. And I need to have little small goals in mind. The lesson in flexibility and patience is simply, the best way to, I think that is important to understand, or for me to keep it in the forefront, is that nothing's going to be perfect, that I have enough money in the bank to weather a storm if I have off seasons, and I have times that I don't have as much income as I would like. But I have to have those small goals in mind. And the small steps are really important. So if I can make rent and insurance payment for the next month, woohoo, I got it. I don't know if I can ever say, yay, I've made it. I have success, because there's always going to be something else that I want to do, to encourage, to continue with this business. I love what I'm doing. And as long as I love what I'm doing, I think that's going to be the most important part, right? If I continue to love it, then I'm going to continue Owl Arts.
Okay.
If it becomes really a hardship, if it's something that I can't keep ahead of, or for some reason can't manage it, then I did as much as I possibly could. I don't know really what it is going to be at the end, but I'm on my way.
Okay, and thank you very much. It's a great story. For those of you out there, we really appreciate you listening in. You can find more of these stories at biztalkwithscore.com and on podcatchers everywhere. You've been listening to Biz Talk with Score and WHBI, and we really appreciate you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.